Hello there and good morning, people. Forgive me for doing a little bit of a rant, but I feel this is necessary. I was like looking at Ubuntu and was seeing this Ubuntu desktop, which is basically just Gnome with some add-ons onto it. And it got me thinking, and I made videos about this before, but then I was looking at people that really like Gnome and how many extensions they use and stuff like that. Like, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole for like an hour. And I came to the conclusion, not the conclusion, but it reinvigorated something that I hate with companies, projects, and stuff like that. And that is when they think they know what the end user wants. And then they just go with it. And before I go into the rant, remember to comment, like, subscribe. If you want me to do anything, react on a video and stuff, or talk about a subject, you can go onto my Discord. I may do it, I may not. But this here is like one of the prime examples where an organization is trying to mimic a successful company without understanding why that company can do what they're doing. So if you look at Gnome, this is just their website. It's a somewhat decent looking desktop. I will not call it ugly, but I will not call it beautiful either. However, I do see a lot of Mac influences here. And the thing with that is I find it super funny that the Linux community is super anti-Apple and Microsoft, but it seems to mimic it quite a lot. Like, KDE, more or less just fucking Windows UI and stuff like that. XFCE is a mix between Windows and Mac OS. Cinnamon, basically a copy of Windows just with GTK. I know it's not like one-to-one, but it's super similar. And you can say, oh, it's because of paradigms and Windows users will have an easier understanding to go into it. And I get all of these ideas. But you can still have that and make it unique. Look at Debian, look at Solus for some extent with their budget desktop. There are ways of making it unique, but still follow the same paradigms. You don't have to copy and copy. The only thing with Cinnamon I would call a little bit different is the start menu, or their menu thingy-madooski. Gnome is they're going even further than Apple. So let's say Gnome was the only desktop we had on Linux. It's more restricted to customize, unless you go in and fuck around with the backend, than macOS is. So if you are a consumer, a user, whatever the fuck you are, like a home average person, accountant, plumber, one of those people that stick little cameras up people's butts, whatever. And you just want to install Linux because now PewDiePie installed Linux, so the whole world is going to install Linux. So you're like, I'm installing Linux. And this pretty desktop looks a little bit like Mac. Mac is pretty to some people. And then they figure out they barely can do anything. Like, Mac have changing wallpapers by default without having to fuck around with. Mac have desktops icons. You can somewhat customize Mac OS. And yes, you can enable all of these things in Gnome with extensions and if you go in and fuck with the code. But the average user don't want to do that. They don't want to sit and be like, oh, I need to install a program to have the pictures of my family easily changeable on the desktop. Or I have to install a program that kinda don't work to get a desktop icon for my Swinger Club's pictures on the desktop. Have a folder icon. And a lot of people love icons, for example. Gnome is notoriously known for taking features away that the community add back in. No company do this, no organization have ever done this. If you look at distributions that ships Gnome as their primary desktop, how many of them ship plain vanilla Gnome? Almost no one. They all have, I think most of them have at least the fucking desktop icon thingy-madooski. But most modify Gnome before they release it as a standard. But Gnome do this because they think they are Apple. Oh, they look at what Apple is doing. They can dictate what they want. Well, Apple is a really unique company. Not only are they a software company, they are also a hardware company. Gnome is not. They don't control the hardware and the software. And let's look at Apple. This is not an endorsement of Apple, but an explanation of what they're doing. Apple has a lot of failed products. You may think, and I can kind of forgive you for thinking this, that the iPad was their first entry into handheld devices. The same with the iPhone. No. The iPhone and the iPad came from a previous product called the Newton. I don't know, let's see if we can find that little sucker. This little sucker here from the 90s, it was basically just like a crappy iPad back then. It could barely do anything. And this was also the time where PDAs was kind of coming up. If you don't know what that is, it's, again, like a little bit like a precursor to a tablet. This failed miserably. But a lot of the things they learned from this project, they used for the iPhone. Well, actually, they started actually developing the iPad, and then Steve Jobs like, let's make a phone first, and then they made a phone first. But a lot of the things that they learned from this failed project and consumer feedback, because it failed because consumers didn't want it. So they were like, what do consumers? Well, they wanted the touch screen, the stuff like the battery life sucked, the screen sucked. So they waited until the technology was there. So they kept what the users liked with the Newton. And then they added the things that needed to be upgraded, that they were bitching and moaning about. So if you go over to Gnome, what should Gnome do? If you're taking gaming companies, for example, there's a lot of gaming companies that are notorious for doing this, which is a good thing, by the way. Well, if Gnome remove a feature, and they see that most people are re-enabling it with a plugin, have that feature back next time. Apparently, there is a massive user need for that. Okay? So a really good example where people remove features, or they look at the modding community to see what features to bring into their base product. Gaming do that a lot. Blizzard used to be really good at this before they became all fucking fucked up in their heads. But they would be looking at the modding scene. Back in the day, there were no clock in the little navigation thingy, the little map. But everyone added in a clock, so they added in a clock. A lot of people made an add-on for counters. They made counters a thing. They saw a lot of people back in the day, if you want to go into a dungeon or raid, you have to physically fucking spam chat. Hello, me over here. I want to go in and kill a fucking thing in there. Anyone wants to join? We need like a tank and a healer. And they saw people made an add-on that made that more easy, so they made Raid Finder Dungeon Finders. Apple do this, Microsoft do this. Microsoft just slower doing it, but they do it. They actually listen to user feedback. Gnome, however, and to some extent this is why we have the Cosmix desktop, which I kind of understand, but we don't need another desktop. They should fix Gnome instead. But anyway, that's just my opinion. They should convince the Gnome developers of not being dickheads. Listen to your fucking customers. Gnome, here's the thing. I used to be the biggest Gnome fanboy when it was Gnome 2. Gnome 3 killed it for me. That justification was everything was going tablet and blah blah blah, and it will, but not in 2010 or when Gnome 3 came out. And it stuck to that ever since. For some reason, they've stuck to kind of that paradigm ever since. At some point, you fucking have to acknowledge defeat. Listen to your user base. Gnome 2 was an amazing desktop. Look at Mate or Mate or whatever people call it. It is Mate, I think, correctly. But try and fucking listen to your customers. Gnome was so popular, or is still kind of popular, but Gnome back in the day was the desktop. Gnome 2 was the fucking desktop. It's not, I don't know the statistics, but I will say that after Gnome 3, they lost a massive market share. And they never really recovered from it. Had they just listened to the community, Gnome could have been the only desktop. They had the chance to be the preferred desktop, the only real desktop for Linux. But they went and fucked it up. They went and became arrogant, know-it-all. We know what you want, you don't know what you want. It's so bad, even Canonical is having problems with them. But at least they do, they don't make their own, but they try to make their own desktop environment called Unity. But now they're actually trying to work with Gnome to fix or re-add features, There's a reason why the Gnome desktop is somewhat different from stock Gnome. At least Ubuntu or the the Gnome desktop, the Ubuntu desktop is different from the stock standard Gnome, is because they listen to their fucking customers. They know what they want to some degree, and they give it to them. There should not be, if you want to install, or if you get a distribution that main Gnome, it should be as close to vanilla Gnome as possible. It should be vanilla Gnome. That should be the goal of the Gnome desktop environment, that you did not need to add these things in. So I love to give solutions to problems. That's kind of what I do. It can be done so simple with a toggling fucking box. Ubuntu kind of do that with their in settings where you can customize their dock a little bit. Just if you want desktop icon, enable disable. You can have it disabled by default, but at least have a way where people can go in to the settings center and enable those features. And I know they say, consistency, and it makes it, if we control the theming and all that, it won't fuck up the user experience, stuff like that. In my humble opinion, Gnome has one of the worst user experience I have ever met on a desktop. It makes a little bit more sense on laptops. A little. It has the worst user experience. User experience and design are two different things. They kind of go hand in hand, but they look and feel what it is. It's a taste thing. But the whole navigating the UI, getting to your apps and stuff like that, it's the worst thing ever. It's worse than macOS and Windows. At least with macOS, if you want to find an application, you have different ways of doing it. You can have a start menu kind of thing. You can have the launchpad that kind of works like how Gnome does when you click the command key or the super key, and you can search your address. But they also have a launcher. So if you are doing work, you don't get zoomed out of all your fucking work and on all your desktops or all your screens. So it takes focus away what you're doing just to open up a calculator. And if you want a menu like a traditional list menu, you have to make an add-on. If you want a launcher, you have to install ULaunch and stuff like that. And when I use macOS, I rarely use the launchpad, or what the fuck it's called, where it takes up the whole screen. Because let's say I'm photo editing and I need to research something for a video. I will just open up Spotlight, I will type in Safari, it will pop up, and I will type in what I'm searching for. I don't get that zoom in and out in my face and be like, oh, what the fuck is going on here? And it does it on all my desktops, meaning all my screens. I have multiple screens like a lot of people have. I was almost lost my headset here. They are taking focus away from what you're doing so much, and I kind of get the idea that they want you to focus on one thing at the time. But it just don't work when you're multitasking, and most people are multitasking. There is just so much. I could spend 10 hours probably analyzing how much bullshit Gnome is doing. And this, again, transfer over even to the desktops that do try to fix Gnome. Because I look at Ubuntu desktop as we are trying to fix Gnome. I look at Cosmic desktop. I don't like the idea of them making a new desktop and it's Rust-based just for the sake of being Rust. But let's take that out of the window. What Pop OS or System 76 is doing, they're trying to fix Gnome. Almost everyone that uses Gnome are trying to fix Gnome. Like, how the fuck can you as a project not see the irony and the craziness in this? We have a product. Oh, for you to actually use it, you have to fix it. Let's take a lot of the things away that you don't fix. Oh, now you're fixing those. Let's take more shit away. For a project that is so into open source, choice, options, scalability to some degree, they are limiting the users more than most fucking proprietary softwares are doing. I would love to use Gnome. I have my desktop on Ubuntu with Ubuntu Desktop. Ubuntu Desktop is the only Gnome I can tolerate to use. If I run Linux, or when I run Linux, it's either Cinnamon, KDE, XFCE, it's anything but Gnome. Because it's a mess. It's a massive mess. It takes focus away too easy. It bombs you in the head with unnecessarily animations that you don't need. And I honestly don't believe that there are many Gnome purists, let's call it that, Gnome virgins or something like that, out there that have never used Gnome without an extension. I would love to talk to people that use Gnome, stock Gnome, and have used it for years. There are, in any case, there will be someone out there doing it. But it's not a lot of people. I would even better say that probably a lot of Gnome maintainers have fucking add-ons enabled. But why not just have that baked in? Look at gnomeextensions.org or com or what it's called and implement the top 5. Every time there's a major release of Gnome, look at what are the problems the community is trying to fix, and then add that to the OS. It don't have to be enabled by default, but give me the fucking options to enable it without I have to go and rely on some spare hobbyist that have 10 minutes of time to make an add-on or an extension that they may not maintain, or if it breaks, it take weeks for them to fucking, update, or I have to wait for someone in the community that knows how to do JavaScripting or whatever the fuck is done in to then fix it. Why not do that in yourself? A lot of Gnome problems people have, and I have, is with extensions. They either work or don't, or fuck up systems. But I need those extensions to make Gnome enjoyable. Why not have that baked in? Then you control it. You can make it not fuck up. You can make it not be a fucking irritation. If Gnome just listened, like they said here, an independent computing platform for everyone. How is this for everyone when you are the dictator of what's going on and not? And I've seen the Gnome developers being super aggressive towards this, to the degree where they borderline are telling people that they are stupid and they don't know what they want. Or at least that's like the tone of the message that they're sending out. How can you be for everyone when you're not even including the things that most people want? And I get you may love to look at a pretty wallpaper like we all do, because, it's so nice. But how often, if you look at your desktop right now as a user, how much of your desktop wallpaper is actually visible? Like, I probably have like 15% on one screen. I would say a fourth on another one. Of the whole desk. Like, this is not, this is just this. No, this is like 90% of the time. How much of the time do you actually sit and just admiring the desktop, the wallpaper, a clean desktop? Yes, you should have a clean desktop. I barely have any icons on my desktop. On my Mac, I have like 5. On Windows, I have like 10-ish. I don't even know. Yeah, 10-ish. The same on Linux. You should, it's up to you to clean the desktop. If you want a clean desktop. And yes, it is nice when you wake up in the morning or when you boot up your computer, you see like a pretty desktop with a pretty, wallpaper and stuff like that. But most of the time, you're not fucking looking at that wallpaper. When I got a 4K screen at work, I got so much real estate. I'm like, I need a lot of pretty wallpapers. I barely look at them. There's like, IDEs open all the time, research browsing going on all the time. I barely look at the wallpaper. They are focusing a desktop, or people are justifying what they're doing so you can focus on something that people only really look at like 5% of their computing time. If the wallpaper was the most important thing in a desktop environment, it would be called a picture frame. Okay? You would not have start menus or ways of opening up programs. I get it. I love my wallpapers. I spend hours finding new wallpapers when I want to refresh my wallpaper collection. I have like a 200 or 500 megabyte wallpaper collection on my NAS. I get it. I love pretty things like anyone else. But I also fucking realize that it's only for like a split second of the day that I actually look at the whole wallpaper. So why not let people use what they want, get what they want, add what they want? I don't get it. So the 0.0.0.0.1% of people that sit and just take in the clawiness of their anime wallpaper till their fucking dick falls off, let them do that. And the rest of the people that actually want to work and do stuff, let them do that. Or people that prefer a keyboard-driven paradigm, let them have that. And then that people that want a more mouse and point and click kind of paradigm, let them have that also. That's one of the things I loved about the old Cosmic Desktop or the Pop OS Gnome edition, is that they allowed you to have both. If you want to go all fucking tab and keyboards and snapping and tiling and what have you not, they allowed that. They had a program that allowed you that. If you want to do more point and click, They allowed you to do that. And I think it's still, or at least that's the goal with the Cosmic Desktop, that still is a thing there. And I would love that. You know, it's a thing that I like, I love, I think it's amazing. It gives people the choice. Why the fuck could the GNOME developers not look at System 76 and say, wow, you are doing something that is super popular. How can we work together to make it into GNOME by default in a way that makes sense and don't take away from our core principles? It would be super easy. And heck, we probably didn't even need a smaller company spending thousands of man hours developing a new desktop that they could spend on hardware support, features, adding features, bug fixing. Because what you have to think about, there's not many organizations that want to do Linux desktop. And the few that we have, they're all almost doing their own thing. They're like trying to solve the same problem individually instead of together. This is the biggest problem I have with the Cosmic Desktop. It's like, even the Ubuntu desktop, to be honest, they should work with GNOME. At least Canonical try to work with GNOME. Pop OS is like, fuck you, like we're doing our own thing. We need to work more together instead of doing the same shit and losing so many man hours on things that are already fixed. Because a lot of things in GNOME is already fixed. But it needs to add more things in or fix other things. But they won't get fixed with people if people just be like, well, we don't like what you're doing, so we're doing our own thing. Then we have 10,000 fucking, versions of GNOME or forks of GNOME. One in Rust, one in Ruby, one in C++, one in fucking C. Then we will have one that do desktop icons, one that don't. Why don't we just work together? Unify the fucking experience. Unify the effort. Make it work for most people. But that, and this is, again, this is also an open source problem I noticed a lot, is that developers are really, really bad at allowing other people's feedback into their baby, basically, their project. Because they made most of the work, it's their thing, therefore they should know better. No. Look at every time you do any coding, look at it as a springboard. You are the one putting in the foundation and the bouncing board, or what the fuck it's called. If someone wants to paint fucking animate cities all over it and you think that's a good idea, or the community think that's a good idea, well then do it. You just made the foundation. Let others help morphing it into what the users want. That's what I envision with open source, is that we don't need, or we don't have a company or project dictating what we do, because we can go in and add the things onto it we want within the project. But if the project is running like a dictatorship and say no, then we will get forks, we will get add-ons that will, in a lot of instances, give the user a worse experience. Like I said, a lot of issues with GNOME is because of extensions, modifications that the community and other people make. So when people are using whatever desktop, and it looks like GNOME, and it's an extension that fucks up, they will say, fuck GNOME, GNOME is bad. When it's really not GNOME's fault, it's the extension's fault. But they see GNOME, they don't see the extension. They don't get that connection. I honestly think that open source should be like that. Like, the greatness with open source is that you make the foundation, and then it basically automatically becomes what the customers want. That should be the idea. Here, I have a program that do X. Let's add to that's the Linux kernel here. I have a kernel that kind of works, but only on my system. Stuff like, oh, I want it to work on my system, so let's implement that. Oh, I want this support. Let's implement that into the kernel. Linux just, they just plug features in that other people want and make sense, and add on to it. So Linux the kernel becomes more of what the community want instead of what Linus want. There's probably a lot of fucking shit in the kernel Linus don't want there. If you could be a dictator and you whip them. GNOME seems to do the totally fucking opposite. GNOME is an open source company that think they are Apple and are basically more or less running it like a proprietary company. I don't get it. They should look at their desktop as, we have the foundation. Let's gather all the good and amazing ideas and needs and want for the users and community around us, and then add that onto our foundation to give the community and the users the desktop that they really want. That don't mean you can't say no to some features. If there's only one person that wants something, or they want to add something just like, oh, I want unicorns to bounce off my desktop all the time, or, I want to be able to split wallpapers in 10,000 different ways. Okay, yeah, that makes no sense, But if it's a common sense thing and there's a lot of need for it, heck, they could even make voting systems. So every time there's a major update, here are the top 5 features we see on Gnome extensions. Pick 2. Have a month-long voting system. Pick 2 or 3 of them, or 1 of them, and that will be implemented in the next major release. That's also another way of doing it. And yes, you can't satisfy everyone. There are so many ways where you can utilize what open source was meant to be in a lot of people's eyes, that you're utilizing the community, either for coding help or for actually building the program they want. Because the Gnome developers, to me, seem like they're just building what they want. This is what we want. It just happened that Gnome is so ingrained into the Linux community as a whole that a lot of people just dealing with it. They're just like, well, Gnome has been around for a long time. I don't like the Qt library with the licenses issues that they may or may not have inside the corporate world. And XFC seems too fucking, old school. Cinnamon is a little bit janky. All the other desktop environments are too small. So let's just try and fix Gnome. This whole mentality that we have to try and fix Gnome should tell the Gnome developers they have a problem. They need to fucking, the Gnome developers, funny enough, is acting in the way that most Linux users are, like the most toxic Linux users are acting. They want to gatekeep everything, they want it their way or the highway. They basically want to be more restrictive and less exclusive than any other OS out there. They want to gatekeep the experience, they want to gatekeep who can use it, because it makes them feel special, so I don't fucking know. I want to love Gnome, and I've been wanting to love it ever since Gnome 3 came out. But I always, after a week or a month, end up installing some other desktop environment. Because it's just like, it makes sense if I was coding 24/7 with one IDE, and then have maybe a research window open. That will make sense. But most end users don't do single app workloads. And then when they realize this, they look at how do Apple do it, and then they implement a worse way of doing it than Apple do it. Or they are implementing the Apple way, but taking away a lot of the things that make it work under Apple. Again, I'm not saying Apple is perfect. The whole center stage and stuff like that is bullshit. It's just another fucking fancy taskbar, in my opinion. But at least with an open source project, the idea should be that, well, it's built to the community, for the community, with the community. When I look at Gnome, this is for us. You suck it up or use it or not. If you have any complaints or idea, go fuck yourself. This is what I get from the Gnome team. This is what I get from what's going on with Gnome. And the fun thing is, they are copying the systems they hate, the proprietary world. Look at their coding language, Vala, and then look at C#, hint, hint, wink, wink. The only really good thing they have done is the TTK libraries for UI development and stuff like that. That's amazing. I love using that. But they are tying so much into Gnome. They are locking Gnome down so much that the biggest Linux distribution on earth, called Ubuntu, they even fucking have to not ship stock standard vanilla Gnome. That should be the biggest, wow, we fucked up here. We need to do something. When the biggest distribution on earth is not shipping your vanilla product, that means that it's not good enough for the masses. But what do I know? PewDiePie is using Linux, so all of this don't matter. He single-handedly converted the whole world, and everyone is now willing to spend 15 hours getting the F keys to work on a laptop if they don't work out of the box. #I use arts, by the way. See you all later. Bye bye.